Good morning, everybody. Committee will come to order. Welcome to the first meeting of the Committee on Appropriations for the 115th Congress. Before we begin, I'd like to convey on behalf of all the committee members our deepest sympathies to those in Georgia and Mississippi who were faced with tragedy in many of their congressional districts, those people and their families. Our thoughts and prayers are with them. I'd like to say what an honor it is to serve as the chairman of this committee, to work alongside each and every member in this room, and for all of us who work on behalf of all members of the House. We have a great group of committee chairs and ranking members, and everybody on this committee is a special person. I look forward to a productive year for this committee and this Congress. I also want to thank Chairman Rogers for his service to this committee and our nation for the past 6 years. Please give him a round of applause. Thank you. I hope I may build on the successes of his chairmanship, continue to reduce federal spending responsibly, streamlining government operations, maintaining strong oversight over how taxpayer dollars are spent, and yes, protecting federal programs that Americans rely on. Thank you all for your commitment to making these goals a reality, both in the past and as we move forward. You will each play a vital role in these efforts. As appropriators, we have a very important power, the power of the purse. And it's important we treat this constitutional responsibility with respect and that we truly exercise it. I ask that we work together in a bipartisan way with programs under our jurisdictions. I firmly believe that members should physically get off the Hill and visit the departments and programs that we have jurisdiction over, to let those who work there know that we are interested and involved in their missions and responsibilities. How we spend our time reflects our priorities, and visiting these departments and programs is important, whether they're here at home or whether they're abroad, whether they're within the Beltway or just outside the Beltway. Physically showing up as a member of this Appropriations Committee tells a lot about our interests in what they do. I've asked all of our subcommittee chairs to hold member public hearing days in each of their subcommittees to encourage all members to be involved and to work with us. We want all of our colleagues to know we are open and interested in their input, their perspective, and their support for the 12 bills that we hope to bring to the floor. I did that with Mr. Visklosky when I chaired the Defense Appropriations Committee for the last 2 years. And I must say it's sort of good to be in a listening mode as what people had to say. I think Pete and I learned from that experience, and I'd like every committee to do similar. Listen to the members, whether they're freshmen or whether they are old hands. Listen to their perspectives so we can earn their trust and support when we do our bills. As you might guess, it's going to be a busy spring. We have a lot on our schedule. We must complete the 11 remaining fiscal year 2017 bills by the end of April, if not sooner. But we also must complete our regular fiscal year 2018 work, holding necessary oversight hearings, then drafting and bringing these bills to the floor. Although this may seem daunting, I believe we're all up to the task. It's going to take a lot of aggressive scheduling and time management on our parts, but I'm an optimist that we can come together as a committee to find common ground on these goals. My partner in these efforts is Nita Lowey, who returns to her role as the full committee ranking member. We both share a commitment to completing our appropriations work on time in what we call under regular order, and pride in our Appropriations Committee. Nita, your congeniality and dedication have served our committee well over many, many years. And I look forward to continuing this relationship in this Congress. It's a pleasure to be with you and to serve with you. Before I turn to Ms. Lowey for her opening remarks, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the 3 new Republican members of the committee, as I know Ms. Lowy will do to her side of the aisle shortly. Mr. Dan Newhouse of Washington's 4th Congressional District. Dan, stand up, take a bow. John Molinar of Michigan's 4th Congressional District. John, welcome aboard. And Scott Taylor of Virginia's 2nd District. Scott, thank you. All of us look forward to working with you and to your full participation on the committee. You may also recognize some new faces up here at the dais. You recognize an old face in Will Smith, and he did a great job. Give him a round of applause. But the lady to his right in blue is the committee staff director, Nancy Fox, from my office and my staff. Nancy. Nancy joins the committee from my personal staff, and I have every faith that she'll do an excellent job in this critical role. As with Will, you should feel free to reach out to her with any concerns you have. Again, I want to thank Will for his years of service, and of course Chairman Rogers for his leadership and guidance during a very interesting transition period. I didn't know what the full front of a hose was like, but in reality, I've been getting it. Finally, I'd like to recognize and thank 3 members from the majority side who will serve as our representatives on the Budget Committee: Tom Cole, Mario Diaz-Balart, and Steve Womack. Give them a round of applause. It was an offer they couldn't refuse. They will represent, as I'm sure those on the minority side, the best interest of our committee on the Budget Committee. Before I recognize Ms. Lowy, a quick bit of housekeeping. The older members will remember this aspect. This year, Scott Taylor and Pete Aguilar will serve as co-chairs of the committee Flower Fund. For those of you unfamiliar with this practice, the committee uses this fund to send flowers or food baskets to a family of a member who's experienced an illness, lost a family member, or is celebrating the birth of a child. We're getting there. As we open the 115th Congress, it's time to replenish our coffers, which are quite honestly empty. So I request that each member make a contribution of $20 to the fund today or in the near future, because it is important to recognize happy occasions as well as sad occasions. I'm still trying to get my $20 from former Congressman Frank Wolf. I had to lend him $20. I think 2 years in running. Again, I look forward to a successful year. Thank you for being here today. It's my pleasure to yield to Ms. Lowy for any opening remarks. Ms. Lowy, please give her your attention, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You do offer an ambitious and inspiring vision for what this committee can accomplish. May it all come true. I look forward to getting to know the Republican members the chair introduced today, and I have 5 new Democratic members to present to you. First, Matt Cartwright. Matt joined the committee at the end of the 114th Congress. But I didn't have a chance to introduce you then. He serves the people of northeastern Pennsylvania, and in his first term, he was elected class president. Grace Meng. Grace represents Queens, New York. Just 6 weeks after she came to Congress, the House passed the Hurricane Sandy Appropriations Bill, including a provision she authored to allow disaster funds to be used to rebuild houses of worship. Welcome. Mark Pocan. Mark comes to us from Wisconsin. He won Tammy Baldwin's seat when she ran for the Senate. Before that, he succeeded her in the Wisconsin State Assembly when she ran for the House. Welcome. And Catherine Clark. Catherine won Ed Markey's seat in a special election after he was appointed to the Senate in 2013. She served as general counsel on the Massachusetts Office of Child Care Services, and in Congress worked on setting national standards for treating babies born addicted to opiates. Welcome. Pete Aguilar represents San Bernardino, California. Many of us got to know Pete after the terrible mass shooting in his district in December 2015. 1 year later, he wrote in an editorial, quote, "We did not let this tragedy define us or divide us." Welcome, Pete. And our side, Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Barbara Lee will serve on the Budget Committee. And we also have a new position on our side of the aisle. This morning, our caucus elected Derek Kilmer to serve as our committee vice ranking member for this term. Derek Kilmer. And in conclusion, I just want to say, I do hope, Mr. Chairman, we can truly work in a bipartisan way to face the awesome challenges that face us. Not only domestically, but we all worry and are concerned about the profound security challenges around the world. There's a lot of hard work before us, challenges at home, challenges abroad. So let's get to it. I look forward to working with you and to all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lowy. Are there any other members that have wish to make any remarks? Seeing none, we will proceed to the business of the day. The first order of business is to approve the committee rules. We meet today to consider and adopt committee rules and subcommittee jurisdictions. You may notice that the agenda of this organizational meeting differs from previous years. We're no longer required to adopt a committee oversight plan. Due to a House rules change, submission of formal committee oversight plans is now exclusively the responsibility of the authorizing committees. Authorization committees, in turn, are now required to submit copies of their reports to our committee so we can keep track of their progress. Regardless of this change, I want to assure everyone that this committee will continue to perform the same rigorous oversight over programs as we have always done. I also want to extend a special thanks to Steve Womack for his work on the Speaker's Organizational Task Force, which ultimately led to this change. Give him a round of applause. Thank you. Yeah. Steve was the committee's representative on the task force for over 6 months and was charged with protecting our priorities. We're indebted to his service. The package before you shows the proposed change to the committee rules. The change shown in italics is a comparative committee print which was circulated to your offices last Wednesday. This is a change from the last Congress, and that is to conform committee rules to a change in H-Res 5, the House rules package adopted by the House on January 3rd. This one change requires the committee reports to address duplication of effort. If we create or reauthorize a program in one of our bills, the report would need to indicate whether that program is known to be duplicative of another program. We have already been doing this in our reports, and this simply formalizes the requirement consistent with the new House rule. There is nothing in this proposal that will change the way the committee functions. Is there any discussion of the proposed committee rules? Ms. Lowy. There's an amendment at the desk. Does the clerk will report the amendment?
Amendment offered by Mrs. Lowy, page 5, after paragraph 4, insert the following new paragraph. 5, each secretary.
Without objection. Recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, the rules package before us calls on witnesses who appear before the committee in a non-governmental capacity to disclose the federal grants, contracts, or other payments they receive. This seems to be a reasonable check on potential conflicts of interest. There is no requirement in our committee rules for the heads of departments who appear as witnesses to disclose their potential conflicts of interest. That is because nominees from previous administrations addressed potential conflicts in advance of their confirmation by the Senate through the Office of Governmental Ethics. However, in the rush to move the current nominees through the Senate confirmation process this month, some nominees had hearings scheduled before they even filed their disclosure forms to the Office of Government Ethics. During the 10-week transition period, that office is supposed to review the disclosure forms of the nominees and work with the candidates on a plan to avoid potential conflicts. Each nominee then files a public ethics agreement promising to take certain actions within a reasonable time frame to address all potential conflicts. Walter Schaub, the director of the Office of Government Ethics, recently wrote to Congress to note that the hurried Senate schedule meant some nominees could be confirmed with unresolved ethics issues. Soon after these individuals are confirmed, they will be coming to the Appropriations Committee to explain the new administration's requests for the FY 2017 and FY 2018 bills. My amendment requires the new heads of department to certify they have completed their disclosure forms and give us an update on the actions they promised to undertake in their ethics agreements. The amendment simply asks them to certify that they have divested the stocks or completed whatever else they promised to do to be cleared of conflict of interest, or explain why not before they give their testimony to the committee. For example, Tom Price, the nominee to head the Department of Health and Human Services, has promised that if he is confirmed, he will divest within 90 days the health care stocks he invested in as a member of Congress, including holdings in the specific medical device manufacturer that led to recent inquiries and newspaper articles. My amendment simply asked if he has fulfilled his promise. The least we can expect of our government officials is to confirm they have lived up to their ethics agreements. I urge adoption of my amendment.
I seek recognition on my own behalf and rise in opposition to the Lowy amendment. This amendment seeks to insert this committee into current political discussions over the financial disclosures of our new administration's nominee for cabinet positions. This is not an area that this committee has been involved in before, and I don't think this is the right place to adjudicate these issues. Confirmation in all that it requires is indeed a Senate matter. On the House side, when ethics become an issue, we have an ethics committee that deals with issues of disclosure and compliance. It would be extraordinarily and frankly not appropriate for the Appropriations Committee on its own to seek to intervene in these matters. That being said, we do expect every single witness before our committee to be forthright and truthful, and I believe all of our witnesses should be held to the highest possible ethical standards. I urge all members to hold them to this standard when they testify before us. I urge opposition to the amendment. And are there others that, any additional, Ms. Lee, additional discussion for 5 minutes?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me thank our ranking member for offering this amendment. Some of us are deeply troubled by many of the nominees that continue to demonstrate conflicts of interest, lack of clear disclosure, and overall compliance with their mandated ethics agreement. asking these questions before the subcommittee, that's a little too late. That's after the fact. As a member of the State Foreign Operations Subcommittee, I understand the importance of diplomatic initiatives in our effort to help the poorest nations around the country, around the world. Our Secretary of State serves as the nation's chief diplomat and represents American interests around the world. However, Mr. Tillerson, President-elect Trump's nominee for, President Trump's nominee for Secretary of State, he's a billionaire tycoon who worked his way up to the top and is very public by cozying up to Russia. His ties with the Kremlin raises the question, whose interests will he represent? I think it's a little too late once he comes before the subcommittee to ask him that. The conflicts don't stop here. Ms. DeVos, his choice for Secretary of Education, she's a billionaire who has spent her career and fortune rigging the system to privatize and defund public education and turn our schools into yet another product for billionaires, corporations, and Wall Street executives to profit from. During her Senate hearings last week, she failed to reveal her ethics agreements and denied her documented involvement with the wealthy foundation. And of course, Congressman Tom Price, our former budget chair, the president's pick for Health and Human Services. It's, you know, the exposure now over insider trading accusations in healthcare stocks. Let me be clear, he did trade, and this is verified as public information, thousands, actually hundreds of thousands of dollars in stock in healthcare companies while writing laws that affect these companies. All of these federal officials conducting official business must not be influenced by outside investments. Ethics agreements with the Office of Government Ethics are the one tool that we have to guard against conflicts of interest by high-level executive branch officials. So we must prioritize compliance at every step of the way, including at this committee. Once again, coming before our subcommittees, that's once they have been confirmed, and that's a little too late. And so I think up front, we need to send our voices to the Senate and to the nominees that honesty and transparency in our government is a must. And if not, if they can't provide their ethics agreements and the full disclosures, we need to know why not. That's pretty simple. I hope this could be a bipartisan amendment, Mr. Chairman, because I think this is our duty and responsibility in terms of transparency and in terms of the work that we have to do as a committee. Thank you again. I want to thank the gentlelady for her amendment.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, excuse me, Ms. McCollum.
I also rise in support of the Lowy Amendment. The unprecedented conflicts of interest with a cabinet with a lot of billionaires in it, I believe it's very critical that the members of the Trump administration certify compliance with the ethics agreement before being allowed to testify before our committee. And I'm going to just go to one point here. As a ranking member of the Interior Environment Subcommittee, I'm deeply concerned by what could be significant conflicts of interest held by Scott Pruitt, nominee for Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency. And here are my concerns. According to the New York Times, as Oklahoma Attorney General, Mr. Pruitt was so close to the oil and gas industry that at times he allowed lobbyists to work directly out of his office. Politico has also reported that Mr. Pruitt has filed numerous lawsuits against the EPA, some which include oil, gas industry, and he joined them as plaintiffs. So they were filing these suits together against the EPA. Now, Mr. Pruitt's close ties with the industry, he will regulate as EPA administrator, are deeply disturbing, as we have direct oversight and responsibility for setting the fees for oil and gas, as well as many, many other grazing things that have to do with the Bureau of Land Management. So I have concerns about how he's going to handle his pending lawsuits against the EPA that he's filed. And Politico has reported that Mr. Pruitt has only promised to get authorization, I don't know from whom, before engaging in personal and substantial, in particular matters that Oklahoma was a party to for 1 year. So this is very different, and this is why I'm concerned. This is very different from the clean and permanent separation from conflicts that former EPA Administrator Carol Browner made when she moved from her role as a Florida environmental regulator to the EPA. So I'm concerned because Mr. Pruitt has refused to do the same thing, and I see this as a tremendous conflict of interest. So I believe it's imperative that Mr. Pruitt, as well as other cabinet secretaries and agency heads, be required to certify compliance with their ethics agreements so we have clear transparency and we have clear expectations that the EPA administrator will be working for all the people of this country. So I urge my colleagues for this reason alone to support the Lowy Amendment for honest and accountable government, and let's get these questions answered and cleared up before we start doing the people's business. With that, I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. McCollum. Additional comments? Mr. Loro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frelinghuysen, Mr. Chairman. Thank you and congratulations on your newfound position. I look forward to our conversations on the train back and forth on the Acela, my dear. Thank you. That's great.
Assuming he's still going.
Thank you, and I want to also say thank you to Chairman Rogers as well. Thank you for your service. This committee, it continues to be an honor to serve with you, Mr. Rogers. I rise in support of Ranking Member Lowy's amendment. It's simple, it's clear. It's about cabinet secretaries, department heads testifying before appropriations, that certifying that they are in compliance with an ethics agreement, or why they haven't yet been compliant. I think the newly elected president, having talked about draining the swamp in Washington, which is very good, and that's why this amendment is so important, because we want to have cabinet secretaries who, in fact, form our government, and that don't make this problem, which has been identified by the president as worse. And I will speak as the ranking member of Labor HHS. We will be holding hearings soon, and many of the individuals may not be in compliance with the ethics agreement. There is cause for concern. I think everyone can recognize that. And for me, 3 of the secretaries that will come before our committee, there have been questions raised. Education, first, Department of Health and Services. Tom Price is invested in 6 companies before the Medicare fight. Much of the confirmation hearing has focused on his suspect stock buys and insider trading allegations. Department of Education, Ms. DeVos's complicated financial entanglements have caused the Senate to delay the confirmation vote. I'm concerned by her claim that her being listed as the vice president of a controversial foundation for 13 years was a clerical error, quote. Department of Labor, Andy Puzder's involvement with Hardee's, Carl's Jr.'s, into which there have been many, many labor investigations, pose potential conflicts of interest. Conflicts of interest don't have a place in our government. And I believe that these folks testifying before our committee should be in compliance with what are established standards, or to explain why they are not, which is why I believe Congresswoman Lowy's amendment makes sense. Let me just hearken, if I say for a second, to the past. I've been here a long time. I've been here for, this is my 27th year. In 1993, I had arrived, I was here in 1990, and a very, very dear and close friend of mine, a very close friend of mine, a very talented attorney, Zoe Baird, was nominated to be Attorney General of the United States. We celebrated. She was at our home. As a matter of fact, it was wild and crazy. We had Secret Service people around the house. I mean, Zoe was just my friend for a long time. Well, in the course of the deliberations, it was came out that Zoe and her family had not been paying the taxes for a nanny. And it became a cause célèbre. So much so that every single newspaper all over the country talked about that here was someone who had a very good income, and there she was, not paying taxes. That is not unlike the situation we see today with the person who was the nominee for the Office of Management and Budget. Now, I just say this because it wasn't a question of whether you have a comment about Zoe Baird or a comment about Mr. Mulvaney, but this is what happened. On January 22nd, President Clinton said early this morning that he was withdrawing the nomination of Zoe Baird as Attorney General. Announcement came after steadily mounting public and political opposition had turned the nomination into his first political test on his first day in office. There is so much surrounding some of the individuals, not all, some of them who have been nominated, that it really is incumbent on us. I would just say to the administration to take this under advisement. Look what happened. If it doesn't make sense, withdraw the nominations. I support Mrs. Lowy's amendment because conflict of interest is a very serious issue in the business that we have been entrusted to take
Thank you,
care of.
Rosa. Any additional discussion on the amendment?
Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Serrano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, congratulations to you. Unlike Ms. DeLauro, I'm more concerned about you traveling now when we travel together on Amtrak with a lot of security and taking up a lot of seats. And so, there's no security for the chairman of Appropriations? You could have said you could have said left. And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Rogers, my dear friend, thank you for your leadership, for your friendship, and for being a person that we all like and care for in this place. I just want to be very clear on what my concern is. The chairman has said that this is something for other folks to care about and to take care of, not care about, but to take care of. My concern is that if things work out for me this afternoon, I'll be switching over from financial services to commerce, justice, science, and which is my old, as the chairman Rogers knows, my old favorite committee. Mr. Covington and I will be facing people in the Commerce Department and other places with great importance in the roles they fulfill. I'd hate to have to spend, either myself or somebody else, the first 15 or 20 or half an hour of every hearing discussing their personal financial affairs or conflicts of interest, rather than be ready to go from day one with the issues at hand. So I would hope, Mr. Chairman, that you see Ms. Lowy's amendment as something that sets the tone so that we can move ahead under regular order, hopefully, and accomplish our work. And those are my words. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Serrano. Mr. Kilmer, congratulations on your new position.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and
5 minutes.
congratulations to you as well. And just echo the gratitude to our former chairman as well. I guess I come to this with a little bit of a different perspective. For me, this isn't about any particular concern about any particular nominee. It's about what we're hearing from our constituents. The vast majority of folks that I represent are simply concerned that the folks that are sent to Washington, D.C., either in an administration or in Congress, aren't actually representing the public interest. And I look at it as part of my job, and part of our job is to restore that faith in government, to make sure that they understand that we are representing the public interest. And I think what Ms. Lowy is suggesting here is not unique in any sense. When I served in the Washington State Legislature, as some of my colleagues did as well, someone who came before the Higher Education Committee had to fill in their public disclosure form if they were a community college trustee nominee, or if they were in the higher education arena in any regard. I know in talking to some of my colleagues, that's true in the Massachusetts State Legislature as well, and the Wisconsin State Legislature. This is good government. And I thank the gentlelady for bringing this forward, and I hope we can support this in a bipartisan manner.
Thank you, Mr. Kilmer. Ms. Wasserman Schultz. 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations as well. This is a common sense amendment that underscores a fundamental promise of our democratic system by simply requiring cabinet secretaries and department heads who testify before this committee to certify that they are in compliance with their ethics agreement. It could be, I'm not sure we've had a more no-brainer amendment than this one could be. If they're not in compliance, then they should have to explain that to the American people. No member of Congress or cabinet secretary or president, for that matter, should be creating the appearance of lining their own pockets on the taxpayer's dime. We simply have too much at stake to allow even the slightest whiff of impropriety to permeate our government. A single policy statement from the administration, be it during the press secretary's daily briefing or in a tweet from the president himself, can have very real consequences for both our economy and the global economy. So when the administration chooses to communicate, it is imperative that there be absolutely no question that the messenger, president, cabinet secretary, or a senior staffer, has no conflict of interest. But unfortunately, we're light years away from that reality. Due to his business dealings around the world, President Trump has unparalleled conflicts of interest, having reportedly resigned from more than 400 entities just before being sworn in. While he untangles himself from this web of financial holdings, we will be holding his and his cabinet's feet to the fire to ensure they are not profiting from the presidency. Like our colleague Tom Price, who President Trump chose as his nominee for Health and Human Services. While I strongly disagree with many of his viewpoints, I certainly respect his ability to hold them. Unfortunately, Congressman Price has been plagued by conflict of interest allegations that include trading more than $300,000 in healthcare stock during a time when he was advocating or sponsoring legislation that would have benefited the company. That is mind-blowing. I can't even believe that one would follow the other without a moment's thought. Another report indicates that Congressman Price purchased stock in a medical device company just 1 week before introducing legislation that would have stalled regulations that could hurt that firm's bottom line. It was not long ago my colleagues at congressional Republicans held up cabinet nominees over financial issues. So I would think and hope that they would be strong supporters of the Lowy Amendment. I hope to see them vote for the kind of honest, open government that all of our constituents demand and that we should each be demanding of one another. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Is there additional comments? Ms. Capter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to you on your maiden voyage here. May this committee perform good work for the Republic in this session of Congress. I stand in support of the Lowy Amendment, and I would encourage all members on both sides of the aisle here to read the amendment. All it says is that each secretary or administrator or other presidentially appointed Senate-confirmed position appearing as a witness before our committee shall submit a written certification that the witness has filed a public financial disclosure report with the Office of Government Ethics and is in full compliance with all of the requirements of that office. That's all it says. I would like to say I view this as a good government amendment. Our nation has never had an administration with so many billionaires appointed to top-level government positions of public trust. Public trust. These individuals happen to hold massive private financial interests, frankly, beyond our ability to imagine what some of those are. Our job is to protect the public's interest. Our committee is the one where administration witnesses come before us and request actual money, hundreds of billions of dollars, impacting every aspect of life in this country, as well as significant international engagements. The question is, when they ask for the money, how will it impact their private interests? And do you have full confidence that, in fact, you as a member of this committee are protecting the public interest? The Lowy Amendment helps lead us in the direction of protecting the public interest. I want to place on the record the following fact. The administration's nominee as Secretary of Education, Ms. Betsy DeVos, owes the state of Ohio $5.3 million for violations of Ohio's campaign finance laws. These violations have been on the books since 2008, and she has consistently refused to pay them. The Ohio Elections Commission, a bipartisan commission, placed these fines on her, and she has never paid them, and it was upheld by a court with a Republican judge in the state of Ohio. I am not on that subcommittee, but I think in the interests of following the laws of this country, regardless of one's private interests, you ought to pay what you owe. So I would say that for the sake of good governance in our country, asking a simple piece of paper to be filed that in fact you have filed your public financial disclosure report is in the interest of the American people, and I urge my colleagues to support the Lowy Amendment. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Kaptur. Mr. Ryan, for 5 minutes, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me also offer my congratulations to you for your new position. I'm excited about it. I'm also a little bit disappointed because I'm recognizing that I have to change my commute back to Ohio. I have to get on Amtrak and go to New Jersey if I'm going to get anything accomplished in this subcommittee, in this committee. Let me just make one point and ask all of our colleagues to put themselves into our shoes as being in the minority party, but also in the American people's shoes, and ask yourself the question, if your constituent was similarly situated as some of these nominees, would we be okay with just looking past some issues that are clearly relevant? Clearly relevant. Our constituents could not get away with some of this stuff. Sweeping it under the rug, little distraction, would not happen. And so we owe our constituents the same kind of vigorous scrutiny that they would have to face if they did something like this and they were going to a job interview. They would not get this swept under the rug. And the perception that we're giving is that we did not drain the swamp in Washington, D.C. And some of our constituents, mine included, who may have voted for the candidate who was talking about draining the swamp, is now creating a big revolving door between big business and government without the proper scrutiny that is needed before we place these people in positions of extreme power and deep trust that the American people want to have. Would your constituents be able to get away with this? And if they're above the law, if they get a pass, how can we know that they're exercising their job on behalf of what's in the best interest of the public? I'm not here to talk about billionaires and hate billionaires. I wish I was a billionaire, okay? That does not in and of itself exclude you from serving the public. But you should face the same ethical scrutiny that everyone else in our district would have to face with a matter that was similar to this. Yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Additional, Mr. Cartwright, recognized. Welcome to the committee, too, of course.
It's an honor to join you and Ranking Member Lowy on the Appropriations Committee. I rise in defense of the Lowy Amendment. This is a requirement stipulated by the Lowy Amendment that any cabinet secretaries and department heads testifying before this committee certify that they are in compliance with their ethics agreement, and if not, detail why. It should not be a controversial or partisan issue. Anybody applying for a job at home understands that you have to be open and honest in everything you are asked in your job application. Everybody should be able to agree that testimonies should come from individuals who are able to demonstrate compliance with basic ethics standards, We already have reason to be extremely concerned by actual and apparent conflicts of interest among several members of the Trump administration. For example, Secretary of State nominee Rex Tillerson testified untruthfully in his Senate hearing, claiming that he had never lobbied Congress against sanctions on Russia. But in the hearing itself, Republican Senator Corker reminded Mr. Tillerson that he himself, Corker, had been called by Tillerson himself personally on the very issue. And lobbying disclosure forms show that Exxon did in fact do just that in 2016 under Tillerson's leadership. Serious conflicts of interest, including ExxonMobil, including his indication that he will not recuse himself from issues involving Exxon after the one-year recusal period. Federal officials conducting official business must not be influenced by private financial interests. And ExxonMobil's failure to disclose to its shareholders that it violated expressed U.S. national interests and policies in completing transactions with state sponsors of terrorism under his tenure as a top executive. And then Treasury Secretary nominee Steve Mnuchin failed to disclose $100 million in assets to the Senate Finance Committee. It used to be a big deal when you couldn't remember how many houses you have. He failed to disclose $100 million in assets, omitted his role as a director of an investment fund located in a tax haven, in addition to having a well-known history of very questionable reverse mortgage foreclosure activity. The Treasury Secretary of our nation should be somebody we can trust will fight for the little person and not the wealthy and major corporations at their expense. If Congress does not prioritize compliance with ethics agreements, what use are those ethics agreements? This amendment is very simple, common sense, and crucial to honesty, integrity, and transparency in government, and I urge its adoption. I yield back.
Thank you. Is there any additional discussion on the amendment? Mr. Polkar. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Lowy. I want to rise in support of this amendment. I come from Wisconsin, and we actually have one of the strongest ethics laws in our state legislatures in the entire country, home of former Chairman Obey. I couldn't even take a cup of coffee from a lobbyist by our laws. It was absolutely zero tolerance policy, and people back home have really come to expect that of government. I think my state narrowly gave their nod to President Trump in the elections. And when I was home this weekend, people were starting to be concerned a little bit because they voted for him because of the draining of the swamp. People really did feel that there was a swamp here, and now they're concerned that instead we've just built a high-rise luxury condo on the swamp. And the concern I think people have back home is that they want to make sure that there is absolutely not just a potential for impropriety, but to have it completely clear that there wouldn't be anything. And I came from the Education and Workforce Committee too here, had education secretaries come before the committee, and when you look at the scope within any department, just education, for example, there's data firms, there's privacy firms, there's testing firms, there's so many firms that have potential conflicts, and looking at the potential Secretary DeVos's recently submitted conflicts of 102 different funds she invests in. That's just not just 102 firms. That could be potentially, tens of hundreds of thousands of firms because each of these investment companies invests in multiple companies. So we just have to know that whatever that secretary is doing, that they're not potentially going to put themselves even unintentionally in conflict because there's a company that's doing some work around education. And I think this is just a common sense amendment that I can go back home to Wisconsin, explain to people that we've taken care of this, that we're doing our utmost in Congress to make sure there are no conflicts of interest, and I would just urge support for this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Pocan. Any additional comments by members? Seeing none, the gentlewoman's recognized for a minute to close.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to congratulate you again, and I really look forward to working with you and all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle as we move our agenda and get things done for the American people. I've been on this committee for a very long time, as I know you have. This should be, and I am looking in the eye of every member here, this should be a strong bipartisan vote. Let's leave the politics at the door. Let's do what's right. We have important work to do for the American people, both on the domestic agenda and the international agenda. I was elected, you were elected to solve problems. I'm not going to repeat all the arguments. They've already been said. I do hope, for the sake of this committee and this Congress and the future, we can have a strong bipartisan vote for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lowy. The question now is on the amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. The noes have it, but a recorded vote has been ordered.
Yep, he's got it.
So proceed.
Mr. Adderholt. No. Mr. Adderholt, no. Mr. Aguilar. Mr. Aguilar, aye. Mr. Amade. Mr. Amade, no. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, aye. Mr. Calvert. Mr. Calvert, no. Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter, no. Mr. Cartwright. Mr. Cartwright, aye. Ms. Clark. Ms. Clark, aye. Mr. Cole. Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Cuellar. Mr. Cuellar, aye. Mr. Culberson. Mr. Culberson, no. Ms. DeLauro. Ms. DeLauro, aye. Mr. Dent. Mr. Dent, no. Mr. Diaz-Balart. Mr. Diaz-Balart, no. Mr. Fleischman. Mr. Fleischman, no. Mr. Fortenberry. Mr. Fortenberry, no. Mr. Feelinghuisen. Mr. Feelinghuisen, no. Ms. Granger. Ms. Granger, no. Mr. Graves. Mr. Graves, no. Dr. Harris. Dr. Harris, no. Ms. Hura Butler. Ms. Hura Butler, no. Mr. Jenkins. Mr. Jenkins, no. Mr. Joyce. Mr. Joyce, no. Ms. Capter.
Aye.
Ms. Capter, aye. Mr. Kilmer. Mr. Kilmer, aye. Ms. Lee. Ms. Lee, aye. Mrs. Lowy. Mrs. Lowy, aye. Ms. McCollum. Ms. McCollum, aye. Ms. Meng. Ms. Meng, aye. Mr. Molinar. Mr. Molinar, no. Mr. Newhouse. Mr. Newhouse, no. Mr. Palazzo. Mr. Palazzo, no. Ms. Pingree. Ms. Pingree, aye. Mr. Pocan. Mr. Pocan, aye. Mr. Price. Mr. Price, aye. Mr. Quigley. Mr. Quigley, aye. Mrs. Roby. Mrs. Roby, no. Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, no. Mr. Rooney. Ms. Robo-Allard. Ms. Robo-Allard, aye. Mr. Ruppersberger. Mr. Ruppersberger, aye. Mr. Ryan. Mr. Ryan, aye. Mr. Serrano. Mr. Serrano, aye. Mr. Simpson. Mr. Simpson, no. Mr. Stewart. Mr. Taylor. Mr. Taylor, no. Mr. Valadeo. Mr. Valadeo, no. Mr. Visklosky. Mr. Visklosky, aye. Ms. Wasserman Schultz. Ms. Wasserman Schultz, aye. Mr. Womack. Mr. Womack, no. Mr. Yoder. Mr. Yoder, no. Mr. Young. Mr. Young, no.
Are there any additional members who wish to wish to vote or change their vote? If not, the clerk will tally. In this vote, the yeas are 22, the nays are 28. The amendment is not agreed to. Are there any additional amendments? If not, I recognize the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Rogers, for a motion to approve the committee rules.
Mr. Chairman, I move the adoption of the committee rules.
All of you have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. It's as good as the script they give me. Apologies. Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Recorded vote is, we're all done. Okay, good. Okay. Okay, we're all set here. The next order of business is for the committee to adopt our subcommittee jurisdictions. The jurisdictions before you make no significant changes from the previous recent Congresses. The adjustments in this document are minor. You'll see a few small agencies have come and gone. We've clarified the jurisdiction of a couple of the subcommittees, and there are some stylistic changes to improve the consistency and the utility of the document. We've consulted with the minority on the document, and I believe we are in agreement. Is there any discussion on the proposed committee jurisdictions? Ms. Lowy? If there's no further discussion, are there amendments? If there are no amendments, I recognize Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Chairman, I move the approval of the subcommittee jurisdictions.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. At this point, I want to note that the necessary coordination on the committee's subcommittee sizes and ratios have been accomplished, and the majority and the minority have completed subcommittee assignments. Unless there's any further business, I ask unanimous consent that the staff be given authority to make technical and conforming changes to the items approved today without objection. So ordered. If there is no further business, the committee stands adjourned. Thank you for your patience.